the federal relief package that has literally just come through in the last several days. And I think overall, it is a disappointment. First of all, I work with the Maryland Association of Counties, and we represent local governments. So, it's a disappointment to not see an element there where the federal government can provide some assistance to the bottom line to state and local governments. We all have to balance our budget each year, and the federal government is not constrained the same way. So they're the only level of government that can really react in a fiscal crisis like the one we're in. I mean, first of all, this is a health crisis, but underneath that, it's a fiscal crisis. We have so many employers who have laid off staff. We have businesses who can't conduct their ordinary business, that we know the economy is not operating correctly. And for those of us in local government, what that means is we're trying to provide the first responders who are on the front lines in this kind of crisis. People who work at local health departments, the inspectors who go out to a restaurant. A couple of years ago, a restaurant inspection was, hey, let's look for bugs, those sorts of things. Now it's like, we got to make sure that this place has put up the plexiglass and has spacing and protocols in the kitchen so that we can be safe from pandemic kind of worries, as opposed to just vague hygiene worries. The whole litany of things that local governments do are very directly connected to what we're reading in the news. I don't want to say it's 100% disappointing, because they got something done. And forgive me for going on, but the American economy right now, we know, is sort of limping along. And for the middle part of the 2020 calendar year, we basically know that it's been an artificial economy because of stimulus funds that the federal government provided in the spring. So to the extent that those are slowing down, the extension of unemployment insurance for long-time unemployed is smaller than previously. So that's going to ramp down. That's a number of people who have been relying on that assistance, they can't find a place to go back to work. So there's an awful lot of people in those spots. The idea of one additional reduced round of direct payments to individuals and to families, that's another little bit of a pontoon, but there's no reason to think that a $600 check is going to ultimately, people can pay rent for 3 months based on that. We've got, there's an eviction moratorium for a reason. We know there's economic stress everywhere, and this is a partial solution. You put it well. Maryland is unusual relative to other states. In most parts of the country, local governments have a sales tax, and that's a meaningful part of a government revenue for a county in Iowa or Minnesota or other places across the country. Most states, there's a county level sales tax. So day-to-day purchasing on Main Street turns into revenue for the county government to provide service. Here, we don't have a sales tax. Basically, our substitute is a county income tax. So we're in a weird spot that income tax has actually been very much held afloat by this federal action. People getting unemployment insurance, that is actually taxable income, believe it or not. So when you get an unemployment, there's takeout just like a paycheck, and with withholding that goes to at the state level to the comptroller's office. So we haven't fallen off a cliff in our income taxes the way that Virginia and other states, their local governments already have with sales taxes. We think that that's sort of an artificial boost, that we're trying to book what revenues are going to look like for the rest of this year till June, and for the budget we're going to try and cut this spring for the following year, and no one knows what the real economy looks like. Wow. And on the spending side, because the feds came through with coronavirus relief money, the CRF program or CARES or whatever you want to reference it, because the feds came through with a lot of assistance, and the Federal Emergency Management Administration has come through because this is a declared emergency and a lot of things are eligible for federal relief there. Um, we haven't been swamped uh, unless you're one of the jurisdictions that ran out of federal money and still needed to do more for your local restaurants and bars or for workers locally and so forth. And if you tapped into local funds, and some of our counties did, then you're already feeling it on the spending side as well. Those of us in the lower level of government we generally prefer flexibility at the local level. So what if you ask county commissioners and council members across Maryland and across the United States, I'm sure what they would say is give us support to handle those lost revenues. And if you give us cash to help offset lost revenues, either anticipated or documented or whatever, and let us fill the holes where we see them, that lets us target the things that we need to target. And in one part of the country, it might be one thing, and another part of the country, it might be a different thing. And that's the way to spend the money wisely. Locals want flexibility, and generally speaking, we got, not we, but the local officials got elected to make those kind of decisions. What do we need on the ground? So the most flexibility, the better, as far as where we come from. And all the reporting and strings attached and so forth, that's fine for accountability, make it public and make it viewable. But if we need to pay our volunteer companies to keep them running service, let's make sure we don't have federal strings that keep that from happening.
There was a lot of rhetoric in the last campaign related to state aid related to COVID. And there was this premise that there were blue states and there were red states, and presumably there are red counties and there are blue counties. We shouldn't, the federal government shouldn't intervene.
I mean, at one point, if you looked at a map where the COVID crisis was happening in the United States, it was a lot of dots in New York City and a fair number of dots in the Pacific Northwest, and then a variety of other places that felt like they were coastal, and they were some of those blue coastal elite states. And it was easy to get seduced into thinking, if that's the nature of this crisis, I don't have to worry about it because my state is in another part of the country and we're just never going to be New York City. Well, if you represent North Dakota or Alabama right now, you are ruining the day that you may have had those thoughts that this crisis isn't about my constituents, because North Dakota is the worst state in the United States right now. Their positivity rate is through the roof, and they've got absolutely uncontrolled spread of COVID. They're in panic mode, in part, I think, because the federal government used that lens of this is a dense area problem, and that's not where my constituents live. That's obviously not the nature of this problem as a health matter. So I'm really wary of, and we can fall prey to that at the state level too. You can look at the map of Maryland and do the same thing. These are the denser places. These are the bluer places. It's Western Maryland has a very alarming spike right now. It has moved around among our more rural counties, but there's no part of Maryland that's sitting this one out.
Yeah.
I'll put in a plug for one thing that I hope stays on their radar, and that is, right now we're doing the right thing by making sure we've got enough equipment and supplies and staff to deal with the medical issue of right this moment. But the access to broadband connection for way too many Americans is too low to survive in the economy that we're living in today. We've got too many students who are in a car outside of Wendy's trying to get a Wi-Fi hotspot so they can do their homework. That, we can patch through that for a short period of time, but that can't really be where we land long term. And some of that is working with private sector companies to lay cable, and some of it is to rethink the nature of high-speed access and whatever we need with satellites and microwaves or whatever the next generation technology is going to be. But that's an area where a combination of government and innovation need to get us past where we are. And that's going to affect rural and urban as well. But it's a disproportionate area on underserved communities in rural America. And it's a big deal.
Michael Sanderson, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.